Welcome to another episode of the Pineapple Perspective with Troy Hooper, sponsored by Pepper Lunch Restaurants. I have the distinct honor and pleasure to be joined today and having a conversation with not only an industry icon, a phenomenal man, but a great friend. His name's Josh Halpern, CEO of Big Chicken. And if you haven't heard of Big Chicken after today, I'm pretty sure you're going to be doing the one thing that I do every day I can, is drive to a Big Chicken as soon as you hear about this and find yourself mesmerized and delighted with this hospitality. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Troy. When you gave that description of me, I was like, who else is he having on? That's
You're the
about as
man.
flattering as it gets, I think. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Josh, before we dig into anything detail wise, I always like to start off. Really, the thesis of this show is that I believe not only is every business in the people business, as many of us say, that's an old sort of saying out there, but that I believe every business is actually in the hospitality business. And it's important that no matter what business you're in, whether it's restaurants, and we'll talk about your history not in restaurants, but to talk about how hospitality applies at all levels of business. So, Josh, my question for you is, what is your definition of hospitality? What does hospitality mean to you?
Yeah, I think it starts with connections, right? You and I were good friends. I knew I was coming on your podcast. That's why I wore my Los Angeles Dodgers shirt, even though I'm not a Dodgers fan. And
More
knowing that you
importantly,
run
what's the name on the back of
Yeah,
that?
exactly. Knowing that you run a Japanese concept, I'm in my Shohei Otani
Let's
Japanese
go.
t-shirt, right? That I got when I was in LA earlier this year. That's hospitality, right? Hospitality, it's not just food. It's not just service. It's how we make human connection in this industry, right? And we all can talk about beyond restaurants, the time that you were at a random business and you said, man, that dental hygienist made my day. That doctor made my day. The car salesman probably didn't make your day. But every so often, you have the one guy you
Yeah,
remember.
if you have a good car salesman experience, it's a real great hospitality
It's
experience
great
because
hospitality.
it's
I think the
unexpected. Yeah.
struggle for hospitality right now is the way it's viewed generationally is so damn different, right? So, like, if you're a baby boomer, you want someone to come over to the table, read you the specials, right? Take an active interest in your meal. If you're Gen Z, you don't want anyone to talk to you. You know, so I think we're quickly evolving this notion of what's hospitality depending on age cohort and the technology in the restaurant. But it's still the way you feel about the experience at the end, regardless of what it looks like. That's hospitality, and hospitality is really one size fits one.
That's a phenomenal quote. Definitely going to post that in your promotion video. Josh, let's talk a little bit about your history because I actually want to tie that in. You know, you don't come from the restaurant industry. Not to say you're not food adjacent, but you really come from consumer packaged goods at the very highest level. Some of the biggest brands, the biggest company in the world in the food business. Tell us a little bit about that history, and then I want to know from you how, as a leader, you have applied the mindset of hospitality internally with your teams, extended through your teams to your products, and extended through your products to your customer.
Yeah, I mean, I started my career at Procter and Gamble, and people talk about how P&G is like getting your MBA, and they're absolutely right, right? And one of the things they teach you at Procter and Gamble is you really need to ask questions. You need to get people talking, and the answer to their questions really begins to inform you on how you need to approach them moving forward, right? So then I spent my career at Procter and then Clorox, and then I took over the Just Born Candy Company's U.S. sales, which is Mike and Ike and Hot Tamales and Peeps, right? So I mean, Peeps is very much about holiday and festivity, hospitality. Then I took over national accounts for the company that French's Food Service, and we had French's Mustard and Frank's Red Hot, and we didn't know what people put on Frank's, so we asked, and 40% said, quote, I put that shit on everything. And we're like, man, you can't have a guy that looks like me talking about that. But so we got that 85-year-old woman, Ethel, to do it, right? And now all of a sudden, hospitality. And then I go to Anheuser-Busch, first to run their global shopper marketing. But then I took over US on premise, which was really the first time most people in the restaurant industry got to know me. And my first day in this role, multi-billion-dollar role, was my first real day in the restaurant industry from the time since I was 16 years old, delivering pizza in Melville, New York on Long Island. And I went back to that Procter and Gamble just to ask dumb questions, get people talking. And we had been declining for so long, and we had so many customers that hated us. I just asked them, what keeps you up at night? I just wanted to understand their pain points, right? And I quickly learned in this business, it's just five things, right? It's traffic, check size, innovation, having a well engaged team, and commodity costs. Then you start to look at it and say, if I'm going to break through in this industry, I better understand those five pain points and how to mitigate them better than anyone else in the room. And that's exactly what we sought out to do.
That's a phenomenal story. Quick connection point. I also am a Procter and Gamble alum. I was in marketing. I was on the Imes pet food business for a while. I was at Imes right before they got bought. I got very lucky. And you're right. Absolute MBA in leadership, in just business structure, in communication. My God, just so many things. If it wasn't for Procter and Gamble, I'm not sitting here today, most certainly. I love that arch of how you connect all that together. My question is, when you think about hospitality, and we're sitting in the boardroom, we're sitting in the C-suite room, we're looking at spreadsheets, we're thinking about future budgets, we're thinking about marketing spend, how to build a restaurant more efficiently, selling franchises, huge thing in your book today, and mine as well, of what we're focusing on. But we're doing all that, and how do you keep your finger on the pulse and maintain this ideology of spreading hospitality internally, externally, across teams, across generations? Like, how do you stay focused on that?
I'm going to give an answer that's probably not conventional, but you know me well enough to know I'm not conventional, right? We're a franchising company. We're not a restaurant company. We're a franchising company. You're a franchising company. You're not a restaurant company. You just happen to franchise restaurants, right? And when you're a franchising company, our sole business objective is to have an engaged franchise system through a maniacal focus on their unit level economics. And when you think about what goes into unit level economics, it's AUV. And you cannot drive AUV unless your food is great and your service is great. So that's a function of hospitality, right?
Right.
Your occupancy costs need to be right, right? Your food cost needs to be right. And your food, you need a high enough quality at the right price and value. And your labor cost needs to be right. And if you have crazy amount of attrition because you're not building the right culture, you don't have a hospitable culture, your labor costs will be wrong, right? So we tell our franchisees every day, what we owe you is the blueprint, right, to achieve great unit level economics. But I can't determine if a franchise owner is going to be a great boss. I can't determine if a franchise owner is willing to put in the work to make it happen. It's just, are we doing the things we need to be doing from a blueprint perspective, coupled with the fact that one of our largest values is, are we doing things the Shaquille way? And when you think about Shaquille, it's all about generosity of person, and it's all about creating big fun, and it's all about, being a good teammate. It's all about what makes hospitality great. So if our true north is rooted in hospitality through the Shaquille way, and we're looking at franchise unit level economics, which can only be achieved with the right level of hospitality, we're able to achieve it from both a PowerPoint perspective and an Excel perspective, if you know what I mean.
I love that. I love the way you described that. So you brought it up. We let's get into that piece of it, because it actually leads into my next question, and you've really teed it up really well there when you talk about pushing down culture and what you can and cannot control. But when you have a brand like Big Chicken and a founding partner owner in Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most famous people in the world, one of the most recognizable athletes in the world, and certainly beyond that, a very highly respected businessman who's just done incredible things with many, many brands, not only from a ambassador and sponsor type level, but from an ownership. Most people just have no idea what he's involved in. So you have a real opportunity to sort of push down or push on to these franchisees or through these franchise partners into the teams by creating this umbrella of brand, this really powerful, visible, vibrant brand. And you do have a lot of say in the quality of that product, certainly executions on the franchise level. But talk a little bit about how you have that opportunity, how that opportunity is translated. What do you guys do at Big Chicken? And for people who don't know, Big Chicken is a fried chicken concept, sandwiches, tenders, ice cream cones, a bunch of great sauces, and founded based on a recipe. Tell the story a little bit about Shaq and his mom, but talk about how you have that opportunity and how do you sort of yield or wield that onto the teams that officially aren't your employees.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's what keeps me up at night. Shaquille is one of the best people I've ever met. He wanted to do something at this stage in his career that built his legacy. When he was a kid, they didn't have a ton of money, and to make it stretch even further, as a military family, Mama Lucille would go to the commissary and buy whole chickens, and one night they'd have the breasts, and the next night the thighs and the drums and whatnot. And when all these chicken companies wanted him to be an endorser, he's just like, "Look, brother, I love you, but I'd be cheating on Mama Lucille, right?" So he really wanted to start this himself, and he's active in the business. And in fact, his daughter and I chatted this morning on a business thing. His family really looks at this as the O'Neill family business. Now, I think the thing we need to continue working on is not only our franchisees attaching themselves into the Shaquille brand, but the Shaquille brand is attaching itself into our franchisees, right? And this has to become more of a virtuous cycle than it's been in the past. And that comes with strong training, strong collaboration, strong discussion. And for a high turnover industry, the way QSR is, that can get tricky. But we brought in Opus in the last, 6 to 9 months to really start to establish how are we continuously training folks in a fun way that's on not just our brand, but also our franchisees' brand, because we only bring in multi-unit, multi-concept guys, right? They have cultures, they have standard operating procedures. They're not saying, "Give me the big chicken loose leaf binder, and that's what our company will be." They're saying, "How do we bolt in big chicken into the other things that we're doing?" So, as we grow, we get better, and that's really the only step forward. And continuous improvement is one of the top values that we have at the company.
I have the great privilege of seeing you quite frequently out at these conferences that we attend, and we both speak on panels and keynote, and you're a phenomenal keynote speaker. And a note I took from this last session you gave in Chicago at the Industry Now Digital Transformation Summit, there was this underlying, and I don't know if it was really your overt intention, but as you were sharing about tools and systems and processes that you're putting into place, you kept talking about getting through to these teams, whether it's on the Big Chicken brand or whether it's at providing a tool or a resource to your franchisees or directly delivering education, training, manuals, and processes to the employees of those franchisees. You really talked a lot about how communication, and you said it earlier in this conversation, Gen Z, right? And how they need or view or want hospitality. Talk a little bit about why you're, I don't want to say obsessed, but you really are focused on understanding intergenerational collaboration and being able to have this conversation and deliver information in a way that multiple generations in the life cycle of this brand and business can really buy into.
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple. We've all experienced things dramatically different from a tech perspective in our lives, right? And you and I, we're the same age cohort. I think you're,
Yep.
a few years older than me, but not much, right? The way you went to college and the way I went to college, though, are dramatically different. My wife's a few years younger than me. The way she went to college, dramatically different than the way I went to college because of how
Yep.
fast tech started evolving in the 90s and into 2000. And we all sort of have these different moments, right? So, if you were older than our cohort, a loose leaf binder training and everything being, marking off checklists in the restaurant would be very, very appropriate. For us, we want some form of quasi hybrid analog digital component, right? Very basic digital things, great. But we're not looking for AI systems. If you're 23 years old today, you want full digital nativity, right?
Yeah.
And the struggle is over 70% of our staffs right now are Gen Z. They want that full digital nativity. And over 70% of the C-suite in those companies do not. And if you don't identify that as a major tension point,
Yeah.
and we're from loyalty, the fact that my parents, knock on wood, both still alive, both healthy, right, in their late 70s. they really want to be treated like they're exclusive guests, and they want,
Right.
the free food and free this and that. And I mean, my dad will still stick his hand into like the mints and take out like all of them, right? Boomer, right? For
Right.
Gen X, us, we want loyalty in terms of like, give me a t-shirt and I'll wear it around town like forever, right?
Right.
We all have like the mug from the bar we went to in college, and we're like, you're not touching that mug, right? Because we valued swag. For us, things were a connective point, right? And Gen Y, it's experiences. Give me a collective experience. And for Gen Z, it's, I want to collaborate with you. You got to give me the ability, even though I'm a line chef in your restaurant, you got to give me the ability to work with you on LTOs and standard operating procedures and all of these things. We all process loyalty so damn differently, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that became the construct where intergenerational became so damn important, because we say hospitality, right? I'm a big Danny Meyer believer. I live here in New York, Metro. Danny Meyer is restaurant God. And when Danny Meyer says it all starts with the people, which people? Right? The Gen X that yells, yes, chef, right? Or the Gen Z begging that chef to partner with him in the kitchen to create dishes together. And the tricky part is, I firmly believe if Danny were to join right now, hopefully he watches, Troy, and Danny, reach out to me, please, because I want to know. But I think trickily and paradoxically enough, the answer would be it's both.
Yep.
Yes.
And one of my favorite words from Gary Vee that I've learned and lived with. The answer is and. The answer is you have to be able to communicate at all levels with all people. And it's the same on the consumer side, too. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're B2B selling a franchise or you're B2C expressing the brand, building brand, or actually LTO trying to drive feet in the door, you have to talk to everybody. And you have to talk to everybody in their way.
Think about how tricky it makes it for you and I. Bipolar opposites, and the answer is and. Would you rather be tall or short? Both.
Both, yeah.
Right? But that's where we're at right now as a restaurant leadership group, right? It's tricky.
How do you, this is an off the cuff question. How do you balance on like even the B2C side? How do you balance not trying to be everything to everybody?
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, it's hard, right? But you have to take all stakeholders into account. If you're going to do something that the guest will love, but your staff will hate, it doesn't work, right? We're lucky in that the flavor profiles that we built among our chicken sandwiches and among our sauces, it's a wide enough range where if you don't like buffalo chicken, great, I have barbecue. If you don't like barbecue, I have Nashville hot. And these things are very easy tweaks, right? Because it's normally one sauce or one marinade that makes the difference, but the protein's the same, the breading's the same, the construction's the same. We also have just the advantage and disadvantage that Shaquille has universal appeal, right? And that means we always need to be thinking a little bit universally, while at the same time recognizing if you don't have a targeted enough voice, you won't break through.
Let's switch and talk about franchising. You and I are doing the same thing, trying to sell something different to the same people, right? You said it in your comment there that, that's our thesis too, is to partner with existing or previously experienced multi-unit franchisees in the restaurant industry. They're well-resourced. They have teams, they have experience, they have local market knowledge, things of that nature. Talk a little bit about the challenges, the opportunities, the successes, the roadblocks you run into. Really, one of the goals of this show for myself is to have a conversation with that audience, to really get to know and express that we understand what they go through, but also talk about how brands think about that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no magical blueprint here, right? I always make analogies, you're married to your franchisees, or, some people use parent-child relationship, others use marriage relationship.
No, it's marriage.
It gets you to the same point, right?
Yeah.
In a way, it's both, right? Because I don't know about your wife, Troy, but I couldn't tell my wife what to do and say, well, it's in the blueprint or it's in the handbook, right? But at the end of the day, you kind of look at it and say there's behaviors and there's consequences. I could go get 500 1 or 2 unit franchisees, and there's some really great advantages to that, and there's some disadvantages to that. And I could go just bring on 50 unit groups, and there's advantages to that and there's disadvantages to that. And neither way is right or wrong. The question is, do you accept the consequences, good and bad, of the decision that you're making? Because if you're not prepared for the disadvantages of the 50 unit franchisee or the disadvantages of the mom and pop, you're going to hate yourself, right? You're going to
Yeah.
hate your life. I read the book from the guy that wrote 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and he talks about how they started franchising and then they literally bought all their franchisees out because they were like, we had the wrong group of people. We got to start over. And it was an interesting story for me because you don't know who you're going to be when you're starting out versus where you are a few years later. The learning that I have now in this 3 years, and you've been in it. You've been in it, I think, longer across brands, but at Pepper Lunch for less. The key learning that I kind of developed through this whole thing is what you need to be screening for the most is A, commitment to your values and how well do your values kind of interject, and B, are you in the store, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what's happening in your business? You go get some of the bigger guys. A lot of them are in their business every single day. They're calling you, demanding to know why the price of a case of straws went up $1, and you're like, man, phone calls giving me a headache, but I love you so much
Yeah.
because I know you're
Engaged
fighting every day for those unit level economics. And then you have a group that's like, nah, we're all the way up here. We've got teams that handle this stuff for us. We don't get into the weeds. All we see is a P&L. We don't have the true construct or understanding of the P&L. We're not on the monthly calls that you guys throw, etc. For me personally, that's rougher. For others, they may love that more, right? So no different than dating, right? You and I, we may have very different types, right? And that's okay. The question is just, do you understand the good and the bad that comes with the type you're going for?
That's a beautiful explanation of it, especially coming from somebody that this is your first tranche into it, right? First
Not
time
really.
in the
Remember, the whole
franchise.
beer industry is under franchise law. And beer franchising, in a lot of ways, is so much harder than restaurant franchising because once those rights are assigned, they're permanent and neither side can terminate each other if the number of cases is greater than a certain size. So you can
Wow.
try to trigger a sale, you could try to trade brands if you're the franchisee, which is a beer distributor. But I mean, within the Anheuser-Busch wholesaler network, they're all franchisees of Anheuser-Busch, and we can't terminate them, right? And they can't
That's a
terminate
lesson for
us.
me. I've been in the food and beverage business 32 years, Josh. That is, I did not know that was the details of the construct of that relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, I understood beer distribution, but I didn't realize it was basically Supreme Court lifetime appointment kind of
They
deal.
are an exclusive franchisee for the territory. But when you think about it, if it's permanent, so you can't get divorced, it's permanent.
Right.
Then you start to say, all right, I can't just beat on you, nor can I allow myself to always be taken advantage of.
Right.
So, how do we horse trade? How do we discuss the key issues in a professional way? Because we're going to be, we scream at each other and blow up.
We're
We're
stuck
stuck
either
with each
way.
other again tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
So how do you have the right conduits? How do you maneuver through situations? How do you pilot things? How do you work together? Right? It changes your entire view, and that's really what we've tried to do here: is stay very middle of the road. And we deal better, quite honestly, with franchisees that view themselves as our builder and our partner. We deal less well with franchisees that look at us and say, well, if they want a partner, we have ways we can manipulate this to our advantage. That's not partnership, right? Again, no different than dating.
So now I have this thought that either you need to be one of the people I'm about to list, or you need to be the guru, trainer, teacher of the people I'm about to list. But I am now convinced that the people from both sides of that equation should be the people we send to settle on the moon or Mars, because they are used to no lose situations. They have to work together. They have to live together forever. And if you imagine that world of like, we're stuck in this tube or in this atmosphere together for the rest of our lives and we have to figure it out, that sounds very similar. So I just asked you to join NASA or Blue Origin or one of those companies
I mean, we
as your
partner with
next.
Blue Origin. I mean, Bob Smith, if you're listening, I'm not really interested at this point, but who knows where I'll be in 10, 20 years when you have that capability.
Yeah, I think you're teaching people how to do it. All right, Josh. Last question to move this through. We've talked a lot about sort of the foundational things around the restaurant business, franchising, mindset. But let's get granular. What are you looking at, thinking about? what's on your mind? What's keeping you up at night? What's exciting you about the future of this industry, about restaurant and franchising? What are you focusing on? What are you keeping your eye on?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be a broken record, but it comes back to the evolution. More and more boomers are going to retire. Gen X is going to start retiring too. As Gen Y leadership becomes more of the C suite, it'll be interesting to see how things evolve. As Gen Alpha becomes 18 years old and has their own credit cards in the next 5, 6 years, their view on life is dramatically different than Gen Z. The restaurant industry is going to continue to evolve. Technology is going to continue to move faster than human capability, right? And that's going to put us into some pretty interesting predicaments. And through all of it, the industry is telling, overall, we're being told your industry is no longer as glamorous to work in as it once was, right? Because this used to be an incredibly safe space, and then we laid everyone off in 2020. And this industry used to be the perfect place for you to go get your first job at 16 years old, and then minimum wage went to greater than $20 an hour. So all of these things kind of surmise, and are we evolving in a way that's going to be long-term sustainable? The restaurant industry will sustain. Hospitality will sustain. Will we? Right?
Right.
And that really is the key question is, will our companies, and that's not Big Chicken and Pepper Lunch, it's every company, will those companies evolve? If you were to go into the 1990s and tell someone that Red Lobster would have declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy this year for the reasons it declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy, you would have been laughed at.
Yeah.
Right? If you went back to 2008-ish, 10-ish, whatever it was, and you told people that Chipotle would be one of the highest market cap restaurants in the world when they just went through their whole food safety stuff, you would have been laughed at. And yet here we are, right? And, when you're a startup, I'm a startup, you're a startup, both part of bigger organisms, but you don't get given the blank check just because you're part of a bigger organism. You have to find ways to get what you need for less, right? One of the things that I figured out is I could sponsor university grad level classes and get, call it 50 to 80% of what I need for less than $10,000. We're getting what I need the traditional way would be north of $100,000, right? And we asked a class at USC, right? LA connection again. We asked them, I sponsored a class in consumer insights in USC. Hey, just out of curiosity, like, what's the chain that you guys like the most? And every single kid in this class, there were like 30 or so kids, every single kid in the class answered Chipotle or Cava, every one of them. And then we asked them all why. And the answer that was given would confuse the hell out of a boomer. Gen X would look at it and get a little sick, even though they get it. They said, because I could order my food the exact way I want it. The combinations are endless. And from a restaurant operation standpoint, are we set up for that to be the universal approach? No. So, we're going to have to evolve. And I know that's a long-winded answer to that. And the folks that are willing, no different than that old book, Who Moved My Cheese, right? Like the guys that are more like Sniff and Scurry. And I hope that we're both on that list, Troy, right?
Yeah,
for sure. We'll be okay. And the ones that hem and haw won't, right? But that's what keeps me up at night the most. Am I staying ahead of the speed?
Well, and I think what's really important to consider in that is that it's not change for change's sake. It's not trend chasing. It's not, reinventing your concept and putting something that doesn't make sense into it just to try to resonate with a significant or particular audience. But it's really about listening. And the point you made is the most important point is, how are you listening? Are you listening to your customers? Are you listening to your employees? Are you listening to other stakeholders, right? Are you getting insights? Are you spending that time and effort to understand, whether that's podcasts like this or going to conferences like we go to, or, having these roundtable sort of get-togethers, but it's being willing to ask the question and hear what's being said and not filter that through the old mindset of we know better, we know best. We're just going to send, dictation down across the chain, because that's when you become Sears, right? That's when you become the company that we never thought would ever go away in our lifetime and was gone in in a blink. And
well, to quote Aerosmith, talk is cheap, shut up and dance, right? And One of the things that we're putting into place for 2025, we're trying to figure out how it'll work right now. We're going to employ a DAO-based, decentralized autonomous organization, because Gen Z, they really want to build with us. They don't want to just be told this is the way it's going to be. They view themselves as their own brand because of their social media presence. They really want to view employment as a brand collaboration more than us who viewed it as an org chart, right? And how do I go up an
Right.
org chart, right? So because of that, and just to challenge ourselves, one of our tactical goals for next year is to actually scale 5 white paper ideas that come strictly from frontline staff. And truthfully, it'll be okay if I don't understand 1 or 2 of them.
Right.
We have enough people that can weigh in. Is it a good idea or not, right? But 5 white paper ideas just to hold us honest, just to make sure we're not bullshitting ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We're going to need that approach, I think, moving forward. So we're going to walk before we run, but we're still going to take those first steps.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can't wait for Industry Now next year. Your keynote on the stage will be the things we learned from our 5 white paper ideas that we implemented. And by the way, the longer list of ideas that were there and why we chose these 5 and how we implemented and where we goofed up. And, that I think it's going to be fascinating. I'm really curious about and very excited for what you guys are doing. That's very innovative, very unique. I hope more companies do something to listen and invite and collaborate with everybody in the chain, in the ecosystem that really affects their business. That's been great. Josh, awesome conversation, my friend. I'm going to ask you a couple silly questions so people get to know you. Bud Light or Budweiser?
Oh man, I've actually had the privilege of drinking Bud Heavy or Budweiser directly out of the vat on multiple occasions. Gosh. There's no better beer on earth than a Budweiser in that form. So I'm going to go Budweiser.
Wow. Well, not everybody has that opportunity, Josh, but thank you. Thank you for enlightening us. That's like getting the secret tour at the super awesome winery and going into the room that nobody knows exists.
Yeah.
I've had that too. I've had the same wine that I bought off the shelf and that same bottle, same year, same everything from inside the cellar that never left the cellar. And oh my God, it can be a big, big difference. Well, what's your airline of choice since you and I travel so much?
It's not my airline of choice. It's my airline I need. It's United, because I live just outside of Newark Airport and it's a hub. So people ask me where I live, and normally I say United between 10D and 12D, somewhere around that range.
All right, last one for fun. If I gave you $1 million in cash and said the only thing you can do with this is buy a car, and it doesn't have to be $1 million car, but you have to buy a car, I want to know what car, since you're from New York, now you're out on the island, you actually drive, unlike the city folk, but what car are you buying if I give you $1 million cash and said nowhere else can you spend this money than on a car? What car are you buying?
Man, if you gave me $1 million, I would try to buy a pepper lunch, I think, because I've shared this with you. I love
that's not a car, Josh.
I know, but I would be like, really? You'd rather me spend this on a car than helping you grow your store count and everything else? But if I wasn't allowed to buy into the pepper rice with the beef pepper rice, which I love so much, I drive a Rivian right now, and I love it because it drives like a real truck, but it's electric. And to have kind of a car that feels like vroom, vroom while doing right by the environment is a pretty good thing.
That's pretty awesome. I love that answer. Yeah. Very cool. All right, my friend, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for the time. Thanks for your great intelligence and experience and the way you express how we should all be thinking in this business. Always a pleasure. Look forward to having you back again and seeing you out on the road soon.
Thank you for letting me share a pineapple perspective. See what I did there?
Great job. Great job. Thank you for listening to The Pineapple Perspective. If you loved today's episode, leave a review and a 5-star rating. I look forward to welcoming you back next time.